belt. Good morning, everyone. Is there a gavel around here or something? This is a great segue. If I had a gavel, I'd use it. Who's got a good whistle? Can anybody do the whistle thing? Is that you? Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Pete Stopulus. I'm the Executive Director of the Board for the Downtown Partnership this year. And to kick things off, it is my honor to introduce Mayor of the City of Davenport, Jason Gordon.
Well, hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the annual meeting here in downtown Davenport. This is always a great event. I do want to recognize some of our team members that are here before I make any comments. We have Alderman Grip, Alderman at Large here with us. We have Alderman John Blanc here in the room. Fifth Ward, we have Alderman Paul Vasquez sitting in the back, who's the Ward Alderman of downtown. And I think that's it for our elected officials. We have members of our community planning and economic development team here, led by Bruce and his team. I think Suzanne's here and Allie. We have Officer Harris. If you guys don't know who Officer Harris is, you need to get out of your house more often because he's everywhere, all the time. He's a real asset to our team. And you know, this is a partnership. I talk a lot about partnerships. We just recently did a ribbon cutting for the new dock for the Channel Cats, and I talked a lot about the partnerships that made that happen. This relationship, this organization exists because of great partners like Kyle and the DDP, our city staff, our police departments, our partners at the federal level and the state level. So all of it comes together to bring together a group of talented, smart people like yourselves. So we're all glad you're here. Happy to have your support for downtown. And so my brief remarks are going to be this. I've been coming to this event for the better part of 15 years, I think, and I've had the privilege to wear a lot of hats when I've been here. So if you go back far enough, I wore a hat. I was Alderman at Large at one time, so I would be here as an elected official on behalf of the City of Davenport. I was a chamber employee at one time, so I came as a colleague of Kyle and co-worker to this event. I'm in the private sector, so I've come with my private sector hat on, working for a company that not only knows the value of downtowns, but wants to encourage the value of downtowns because they know it's good for the rest of the community. And so today, and also I forgot one, and probably the most important, I've been here as a downtown Davenport resident. My wife and I lived downtown for 8 years, some of the best 8 years of our lives. So I've been here as a resident of downtown as well. But this is the first time that I've had the privilege to wear the hat of mayor at the annual meeting for the Downtown Davenport Partnership. So as mayor, it's my privilege to welcome you here for this meeting. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Pete.
All right, I'll keep this short and sweet. Kyle's got a great presentation for us, but as I mentioned, I'm the executive director of the board, but I'm very humbled to be the representative for our board, and many of our members are here today. So if you are a member of the Downtown Partnership Board, would you please stand up and be recognized? Thank you all who put in a ton of time, volunteer their time and their efforts to make this a great organization. And I have one anecdote to share. I was on the phone with a business guy out of Pennsylvania the other day, and he said, hey, I was told that you guys have some stuff downtown. He's like, I was at a restaurant down there, and man, that is a really cool part of town. He says, it just seems like it's kind of up and coming. And I said, it's funny, my grandfather was born there about 107 years ago, and it was thriving back then. And he says, well, I'll give you a term you can use, and you can steal it if you want. It's an up and coming back part of town, and it has been up and coming back for a number of years now, due in large part to this gentleman, Mr. Carter. Come on up, Kyle Carter.
All right, testing. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. For those of you who are new to the room, my name's Kyle. I am the Executive Director for the Downtown Davenport Partnership. This will be my 21st year with the organization, which is hard to believe that my career can buy a beer at this point. It's been a really, really fun ride, and we have a lot to get through today, so I'm going to jump right to it. For those that are less familiar with what it is we actually do for a living, the industry lingo is called place management. And that's literally the act of managing tax districts, because what's so special about the people in this room is that they are taxing themselves above and beyond what they would normally be paying for the greater good. Our entire mission, as you'll see up here, is to literally make Davenport and downtown a better place. And I couldn't think of a better career to spend my life doing than to do this type of work. But more specifically, these pillars of work break down into 3 big categories. I know some of you have heard this before, but it's really important that I think we always remember. This business and economic growth, infrastructure and livability, and advocacy, promotion, and events. That covers everything that this entity actually does, from the flower baskets to government affairs, to events, festivals, business intelligence, you name it, we do it. If it happens downtown, our fingerprints generally have something to do with it. But I like to always remind everybody of why our scope of work is so broad and so incredible. And that's because some very smart people who came before us merged all the different organizations that used to be downtown. This is the first year I've ever put dates on this stuff. If you've seen this presentation before, you'll see the 70s, the 80s, the 60s, the 90s, the 1920s. All of those organizations used to have a facet of that big scope of work that I just showed you, and we merged it into what is now known as the Downtown Davenport Partnership. And that has actually celebrated its 25th anniversary last year, which I actually forgot to mention at our prior event. But today, those are all housed underneath the Quad Cities Chamber, and we'll talk more about that later. But I always want to point this out because this is a vast amount of work for a very small organization, but we've done it very efficiently and used your dollars very wisely. So on that note, where we get those dollars are from our property owners and our businesses, of course. We now represent over 270 businesses downtown. There's 460 property parcels, 2,700 residents, 6,500 people that work here every day, and a whopping $434 million in taxable income. I want to lean into that for my friends from City Hall. Taxable income. That is the money that actually goes back into the coffers of both the general fund and runs not just downtown, but the entire community. And that is a huge number for the tiny piece of real estate that this geography actually takes up. And of those folks, 85% of them are local. So I've heard over the years, hey, who are these people? Is it some faraway guy in California that's really making money? Who are the people that actually are building and doing these things? These are your neighbors. These are Quad citizens. The vast, vast majority of these properties, businesses, and everything we do is locally owned. And I think that that is a very, very important statistic. Only 10% represent national corporations, chains, or federal entities, and the other 5 is government. So that's just great context to keep in mind as we talk about the money that you're generating, the funds and work that you're doing is being poured right back into this community. And where those funds come from are this geography here specifically. So when we talk about downtown, we mean this very specific taxing district that we'll talk more about at the end of the presentation, but it's been around for almost 50 years. And so what's incredible about this is that it runs basically bridge to bridge, river to railroad tracks, and so it gets a little bit of everything in the core. And just want to make sure people understand that there's a reason sometimes we can't maybe do a project up in the hilltop or further into the village. There's a very distinct geographical border that's associated with the folks who operate this organization. And before I get too much deeper, I want to take a minute to thank staff. So Downtown Partnership itself is just the 4 core of us, but as part of the Chamber family, we also get a ton of help from finance, admin, marketing. In fact, the communications team in particular did an enormous amount of work for the brand that we're going to talk about later in this event. But this presentation is only possible because of the hard work of the people that are on my left over here in particular, and many of those out in the audience. And just, if you're ever wondering if you're getting a good bang for your buck, I can promise you that these people work their butts off and care very, very much about our work, our community, and representing you well and for the dollars that you provide us. But the guys that you might see more often than us are sitting, as usual, in the back corner, which, by the way, we do not tell them to sit in the back corner. They just find their way there every year. So I want to give a huge round of applause and thank you to the guys on the crew. We have a whole section of the presentation that really dives deep into what they do, but please know that we're very grateful for you guys, and this place is only good as it looks, and you're a big reason for that every day and every night. So when we start to talk about the totality of our work and how all this starts to blend together, business and economic growth is always where we start this conversation, and it starts with our budget. This is through May, so I want to be clear that because of the timing of this meeting, there's actually one more month in our fiscal year. So this isn't the final numbers, but it's about 1.6 million that we're bringing in. But that's a combination of things. That's the property taxes that we've been talking about. That's the very generous funding that we get from Rhythm City as a result of our development agreement when gaming was made legal in Iowa. We also have some funds from the city who help pay for additional clean and safe services in the parking ramps and Skybridge and other city assets that they own. And then we have a variety of grants. So by the time June is done, this number is actually going to perk up a little bit more, but it's actually very similar to what our expenses wound up being. You'll see that we spread things around about as evenly as we can, but we've been narrowing down our costs. We've been trying to tighten our belt over the last couple of years, and we're pretty confident that our budget's going to land right about where we wanted, both in revenue and expense, and we're very proud of how we've balanced both operations, capital improvements, and grants that we'll talk a whole lot about here in just a minute. So speaking of stats, and your hardworking staff, these are just what our internal staff did between the four of us. So in the past year, we had over 1,300 business assists, project follow-ups, 560 calls to your local, state, or federal government to deal with something, whatever it may have been, and 1,484 business promotion, event, and assistance. Those are very individual instances of all these different things happening, but just to give you some context of like what happens every day in our office, it's responding to those things. But to fully understand that and appreciate that, we need to look at it from the higher level. What you're going to see now is data that we're getting from Placer, and speaking of our broader chamber team, Bill, who is an incredible numbers wizard who uses this incredibly powerful data from Placer to tell us more about what's actually happening downtown on the ground. You'll see that we have a lot of people in downtown that you may not realize are here on any given day. When we say out of market, in this particular context, it's out of 52801, meaning outside the downtown zip code. A huge number of those people make up who's down here every day, and that's when we talk about downtown belonging to everyone, downtown being a community center, you start to see it in those numbers. And where you see the bulk of our time, of course, as the weekend gets here, we're very heavy on the weekend. That's a lot to do with our bars, restaurants, our hospitality scene. So it's not a surprise that this is inverted from 20 years ago, where it used to be that office foot traffic would have bolted up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you would have seen maybe an opposite effect, especially on foot traffic trends by time. You can see it kind of dip in the very early evening hours, but we maintain a lot of foot traffic after dark because of how many apartments we've built, because of our nightlife. That is totally different than it was in the 90s, even different than it was in the early 2000s. But the data from Placer continues to show how important that 24/7 traffic is to downtown. And one of the more neat and new data points that we've dug up this year is for the folks who work downtown, there's a lot of time this misunderstanding that they all must just live downtown. Far from it. There's people from all over the Quad Cities Metro, and you'll see this heat map that the folks who work down here, very few of them actually live down here. There's certainly a population of them, but I mean, we've got everything from rural Illinois to Davenport to Bettendorf. It's a mix. I think that's just another good bit of context to understand like who's actually making up the population of people down here. But over the course of a year, if you stretch out the entire calendar year and you look at it, on average, there's almost 18,900 souls that travel through and from downtown on a given day. Now that number is greatly buoyed by the big events, right? So you see these giant spikes. That's basically alternating currents, that's BIX, that's Festival of Trees. It's all of our major events where you see that. The bottom line, those two blue lines at the bottom, I know it's hard to see from the back, but it's almost static. Those are the residents and extended inbound commuters. So this goes to the showing, the whole point I'm trying to make here is that the human beings that descend on downtown and to have fun, to do work, like it is a humongous percentage of who actually makes up the downtown. It just goes back to the idea that this is everyone's downtown. It doesn't belong to the people who are here the most often, there's a hell of a lot more people that are here on short notice and come and go on any given day. So how does that all translate to how much money we're actually spending, right? So in the course of the last year, we completed about 14 million in new projects. There's another 35 million under construction right now, and a huge number of planned projects that I'm really excited to do a very deep dive on here momentarily. And in the past 10 years, we've had over 400 million invested. And if you go back to the early 2000s, it's well over $1 billion now. When I really started my job in the early 2000s, that number was a fraction of that. The fact that we're creeping up over $1 billion and nearly a half a billion in the last 10 years is amazing. So what are those projects? We saw a lot of really fun ones come out of the ground this year. Red Band did an incredible job renovating their building, expanding it, making their drive-through bigger. We have new Airbnbs in what I refer to as the old starting line building, but where M Lounge is today. Great project on 5th Street. Pete did that project. The Delph's Pro Gym is over there. There's also some living units above it. Beautiful property on 5th Street that gets missed sometimes because of the railroad tracks. Soul Ties technically opened last year, but they were right on the edge. Boozy's, of course, was all over the news, and we were thrilled that they were able to find a new home inside of the Freight House. Maldan opened up in the Union Arcade building. The Berg got renovated. Apartments are now over what you might remember as the old Antonella's location on 3rd Street where R3 Roofing is. And the Bix Jazz Museum, who I see in the audience today, celebrated a big ribbon cutting recently, and they're really rolling out the red carpet this summer, and we're so happy to see you guys out on 2nd Street, out of the basement, and more on that in a minute with the Common Core building. But we're just so happy that the public's going to have that much more accessibility to Bix history. A couple of other things, of course, the businesses are the lifeblood of all this. Property's great, but if there's no businesses inside of them, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good. We had a whole lot of really exciting ones this year. We had a lot more expanded and retained this year. A little bit fewer new, but a whole lot that we hung on to, and that's just as good. One in particular that I'd like to call out is Planet 93.9, who has been such a partner for alternating currents. The gentleman who bought the Barrel House building relocated them into the upper floor of that property, and so we have another radio station broadcasting down here, and that's amazing. But you'll see just a little bit of everything from like Regis opening up down here. There's bars, restaurants, office. It's always just a good mix. And so property improvement grants are something that DDP does to help energize what we're talking about here. So we leveraged over $870,000 in private investment with just a shade over, 130-ish thousand that DDP put into grants. So again, these are the same grant dollars that the property owners are generating themselves that we're giving back and putting right back into the district and getting way more private investment out of it for the dollars that we're putting in. So there's, roughly 15 or so grants that we did this year for both interior and exterior. And it's also very uncommon for groups like ours to fund interior improvements like HVAC. We're very proud of that. I think that's something that very few organizations there's very few sources of money to do that. If any of you have ever done a build out in your life, you'll know that grant dollars to fix air conditioning and build walls and floors, it's extremely rare. So this is very precious money that we're proud to provide. Since 2008, and that's just when we started tracking this, we've put $16 million of private sector money back in through leverage grants, which is an amazing number when you stop to think about what we produce in a given year. So one of my favorite grants that we gave out this year was our entrepreneur grant that helped Sisters in Bloom get off the ground. These gals are veterans. They've done amazing work in their young lives. They have already expanded. This photo is their old location. In the short time that they've been down here in a year, they've already merged and bought out Issa Balloon on 2nd Street, and they've included the balloon business now into their floral shop. They're going to be rebranding. I'm not sure if they were able to be here today, but they have been wonderful to work with, and it's a great example where DDP can give a little bit of cash to give somebody just a little bit of extra help that they needed, and it's been a real success story to see them grow. Other projects, I saw Alex in the room. The Executive Square renovation is a big deal. That property had been closed since the building collapsed. It had some of its own structural issues that have been solved. It's about to reopen. There'll be commercial and residential market rate units in there. I want to thank he and his team for doing this. This is a big deal to get to turn a corner and turn a page and have Executive Square's building come back to life here very soon. This one will be considered complete probably within weeks, but it's technically still wrapping up. Another really exciting one you'll see is that I mentioned earlier, the Barrel House building was purchased. For those who don't know, Dana Wilkinson owned that building forever. She's one of our OGs downtown, literally been downtown since the 90s. She was able to sell her business, sell her building, and Dana, I hope, is somewhere in France enjoying life. But the new owner is going to really heavily invest in the patio of Barrel House. You're going to see some more life come to the old Boozy's location. It's getting renovations done to it so it can house a new restaurant. It needed a lot of improvements to brickwork, roof work, windows. It needed everything. But these are some good examples of projects that are in the works right now. But one of my favorite ones, and those of you who know me, this should come as no surprise, is that the artist formerly known as River Music Experience, now known as Common Chord today, is going through another evolution, and a really important one in the context of downtown. Common Chord, as you may have heard, is relocating the Redstone Room and its entire organization to the ground floor of the Redstone building. This is a deal that we put together with, we've worked with the Bechtel Trust, we've worked with Hubble Waterman, we worked with, the Goldsteins, we've worked with the Common Core board, we worked with our board. A lot of good heads got together to make sure that the financing could come together to actually pull this off. In this August, we're going to be celebrating with Robert Randolph as the opening show. The Cultural Trust has been involved in these conversations too, and we're going to talk about more of that later in the meeting, but this is a big deal because it gives context to my next slide here, which is how important the core of downtown is. And I love this shot. Like, this is one of my favorite photos that we've taken in years. It just feels like the big city that we are. Common Chord and Redstone is absolutely critical to get life back at the corner of 2nd and Main Street in the evening hours, during the daytime. This block has changed a lot. It's very beautiful and it's in good shape, but there's higher vacancy here than we'd like to see. And we've got the hotel obviously right across the street. So the energy that the Redstone is going to bring to that corner is very, very important to the overall health of downtown. When you look across the street, we've got a new tenant that's knocking on the door to go into the former subway space. So hopefully that deal closes, and we're excited about that. Restoration St. Louis is putting more funding and more energy into the Parker building. I think you're going to see some new energy there in the not too distant future. But if you look to the north, you'll see that the new apartment building, Apartments on Main, is completed now in that photo at 3rd Street. We still have EICC right there in this big square block, and they're looking at ways to get more students in there. They have not had a ton of programming in that building over the last several years, but the new chancellor is really working on getting more and more student energy in that room. So when you look at the totality of that, we've got some spaces that used to be former businesses, analog Boozy's, that are great opportunities to fill in. You have 2nd Street, and you can start to see why Redstone and Common Chord being there is a really important puzzle piece to making sure that we have the energy for that. And we have this brand new apartment building that's starting to fill up too. So we've got all the right pieces there, but this is, I think, a good example of making sure that we never take our eye off the ball. 20 years ago, we did a lot of work to lift this core up and get it to the shape that you saw it in. COVID happened, some things changed, and some businesses moved on, and this is kind of moving into the next evolution of its life. But I think it's very, very important that we never just assume that you can plant the mission accomplished banner and say that you're done with downtown. That's not how downtown development works. It is a constant, eternal evolution, which will feed into our brand that we'll talk about here in a little bit. So beyond the core, there are 9 projects that will fundamentally change downtown as we know it on the horizon. The former Howard Johnson space is still being planned for the hotel that Pete's working on. One of the reasons you haven't seen something pop out of the ground on that is that part of that agreement was to work through the land recycling program. It's not a secret that there's a lot of environmental challenges on this property. To be able to do that and do it right and do it properly means you got to go through a million fiery hoops with the state. You got to make the EPA happy. You got to do all kinds of things. And so this project will get there as fast as it's capable of getting there. But that project is still very much moving along like a duck with its paddling underwater. Just be aware that there's still plenty of progress on that, but there's a reason this takes so long. Secondly is the former Stardust building will be announcing a new life soon. I'm not at liberty to share who and what exactly, but I'm very, very excited about the people that are going to do it. It will be another event use for that space, plus some other additional stuff. But I know a lot of people were bummed when Stardust closed its doors, and I'm happy to say that in the very, very short-term future, you're going to hear some great news about who's doing what in that location. The Centennial Bridge is a massive opportunity. Is it going to move just a little bit to the west? Does it move further toward Marquette? Those decisions are still being made, and we have 10 years before this thing gets built. But it will change how and where people travel on the west end, and that's a big, big deal too. Ground Transportation Center is an opportunity that the city's been working on for many, many years. So where that's at right now is that they are doing a bus study so they can understand where today's users are actually picking up the bus and whether or not a facility of that nature is really necessary anymore. What we'll always have is a bus facility downtown. There's no question. It's really just a matter of whether or not a smaller one remains on that site long term. That is an entire square block of downtown with riverfront views that is amazing opportunity for us to develop. It may yet retain some of its bus routes, we'll see, but those studies are happening, and I think a year from now, we'll have answers from the city on, hey, here's the plan, here's how we can make sure our folks using the bus service get service that they need, and here's what we can do with the rest of the real estate. One of my favorite ones that you'll see tucked away down at the bottom there is the former YMCA site, speaking of the West. This lot has been purchased, and there is a major institutional users, 2 of them actually, who are planning a multi-million-dollar development that would forever change the face of West Downtown. They want to share that news themselves, so I'm not going to go into all the details as badly as I want to, but know that much like Stardust on a smaller scale, the wheels are turning, there's going to be something incredible there, and I think the city is going to absolutely love both the city, the formal city, and the community at large is going to be very happy about what is being proposed for that corner. And last but certainly not least, is our good pal Steve, who's in the room today, who you may have heard purchased the Quad City Times building. And this is the first time that these images have been shown anywhere. So breaking news, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I do, but the concepts for this property are beautiful. This would be a commercial user. We'd be able to retain employees downtown. You know, this building could have just been demolished. It could have been empty. It could have done a lot of things. The fact that within less than a year of the Quad City Times announcing that it was going to leave, that we've got a buyer ready to go on that. Sorry, Siri is yelling at me over here. We've got a buyer in short order. That speaks to the health of downtown. The fact that a building this challenging, because it is a challenging building, it's cool, but it was built for a very specific use. And I think it's just a very great microcosm of the fact that we could spin around and in that short a time have a developer that the quality of Steve and actually have that come back to market potentially as fast as it could is good news for Davenport and great news for downtown. So this is another one where I think you'll hear more about who the specific users are, but we're hoping that this deal closes, that these concepts become reality. I think it's a beautiful design. I hope it does come to fruition. I just want to say thank you for leading the charge and frankly taking the risk to be able to put this deal together, and I hope you're able to close it, Steve. Thank you. So, none of this works if you don't have infrastructure. And this is where a lot of our work with the Clean and Safe crew comes in. Our cleaning ambassadors are working every single day. They removed 936 cubic yards of litter this year. We had 800 flower pots and ground planters that are watered every day, 82 graffiti tags removed, 182 hours of snow removal, and 10,000 hours of cleaning logged since we were tracking this in May. And you know how I can tell you that and know that I'm not BSing you? Is that we literally track it through software called Aponic. These guys go out of their way to make sure that they're really taking care of the place and recording what they're doing and when they're doing it. There are over 60,000 individual instances of cleaning an object of some kind in the past year, and that's just through May. Doesn't even include the June numbers. Every single morning and every single afternoon, these guys are picking up things, whether it's on the street, in the parking ramps, wherever it may be. the absence of a problem is sometimes hard to get excited about, right? When you walk down the street and it's clean, it doesn't always dawn on you that somebody made it that way. So I want to just point out how important this relationship is. Now, specifically, we have a city services agreement. So beyond what DDP pays for, which I'll get into in a minute, the city helps fund the parking ramp cleaning, the trash pickup, the skybridge cleaning, pocket park maintenance, all those things. Our team we are a nonprofit. I want to be crystal clear. We are a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to make the world a better place for Davenport every single day. So while we receive funding to do this work, because no one works for free, we think we do it exceptionally well. We think we do it for a price point that makes sense. And you may have read an article that the city is going to bid this in the future, which we have absolutely no problem with. We will take great pride in bidding that work and understand that that's just a process of the city. It doesn't offend us in the slightest. But I want to say out loud, I'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who works harder than the guys in green in the back of that room. And thank you again for the work that you do. Because beyond the city services, they're also doing what DDP pays for exclusively. These are what your SMID tax dollars are paying for. All the weed abatement, street litter on the sidewalks, which the city does not pay for, pet waste cleanup, social service referrals, encampment resolution, which we'll talk much more about here in a few minutes, equipment maintenance, power washing, and park cleaning that is beyond the stuff that we contract with the city for. So this is a day in the life of a lot of what they clean that I hope you never see, or if you see it very briefly. This is the type of stuff that any given day they wake up and clean, whether you ever saw it or not. And the flower basket program, which we pay for 100% out of the SMID dollars, is a program that has been around a long time. We have over 800 flower baskets and planters now, which is crazy. I mean, when I started my job in 2005, I think we had like 250. I mean, we have just grown and grown and grown this project. But a lot of that is because of the woman behind me here. Mary Ellen Chamberlain passed away this year, and if you didn't know her, she was a legend. The woman ran Jimmy Carter's presidential campaign. She funded the flower baskets in the 1990s through the RDA. Her resume is longer than my arm, and it is thanks to Mary Ellen and the vision of the folks who founded gaming in Iowa that we can thank every day that when we look around and see these flower baskets, if it weren't for Mary Ellen's leadership, you probably wouldn't have them, because if somebody hadn't paid for them, we wouldn't have got them. I just wanted to take a minute because Mary Ellen was a huge influence on my life. When I started, I was 23 when I started this job. I'm 45 in July. She really took me under my wing. Was like Jean last year when I talked about that. Mary Ellen was just everywhere, and she meant a lot to this community. So I thought, we couldn't go through this presentation without doing a tip of the hat to a woman who changed this community and the face of it for the better. And, I could do an hour on Mary Ellen's career, but for now, just know that if it weren't for her, we probably wouldn't have ever funded the flower baskets. Speaking of great human beings, he's in the room today, and we also have another one of our officers who's been really involved in our public safety program. So DDP pays out of its own pocket for additional off-duty hours for officers downtown. They engage in everything from criminal activity to assisting with on-street issues, connecting with social services for homeless assistance. They do a little bit of everything. Dennis Colclaser has been running that program with Officer Harris and many others. There's some stats that you'll see that the majority of his time is checking on businesses, citizen engagement, social service referrals. Yes, we have arrests in there as well, but you'll see that it's a much smaller number than the vast majority of the time, than the vast majority of what they do. I just want to go out of my way to say that the Davenport Police Department has been exceptional. They lead with their heart. They don't lead with the intent to arrest. They avoid that whenever they can. But when we need them, they're there. And having those extra off-duty hours has really been beneficial. And just want to say thank you to Colclaser in particular, who really takes this job seriously. Sergeant Harris has been doing it forever, but downtown would look a lot different but for the efforts of these guys. As we transition out of that work and into some of the more beautification work of infrastructure, the public art that we've been doing with Quad City Arts just keeps growing. We've been adding to our rotating program. I hope you guys have seen this out there. And today, we're going to be celebrating a dedication of a brand new mural at Martin Luther King Park. You'll see a picture of it up there at the top. And that has a very specific story to tell. Now, I'm not going to steal Ryan's thunder. There's a ton that you're going to hear about later today. But please know that there is black history on that block that is very significant, that has been buried and forgotten over the years. There were black businesses, it's dating back to the early 1900s and late 1800s. That corridor of Fifth Street was vibrant because that's where the train stopped. People forget there used to be a train that stopped every single day, dropping off hundreds of passengers on Fifth Street. And a lot of the clubs and hotels and everything that popped up around there were welcome to everybody, and that was very rare at that time. And part of what this mural is doing is telling that story. Ryan's going to do a much deeper dive on that later this afternoon at 11, I believe, down at MLK Park, and I'd encourage all of you to come and celebrate that incredible history and the unity that it provides. Other beautification projects we've been working on, we're doing a third and main engineering study for more streetscape, but one of the most exciting ones that I think we're going to take on this year is wayfinding. If you've actually never been to Davenport before and you walk down here, you might realize that you have no idea where you're going. We barely have a sign in this downtown that tells you where anything is. If you're a visitor and you're like walked out of the Blackhawk and wanted to know where the bar district was or where anything was, there's nothing, absolutely nothing. We take for granted as locals a lot of times that you just know where to get around down here. So we're going to be doing a wayfinding study, and we're going to start to look at what it would cost and what the placement would be for signage that actually helps people get around down here. This has been on my list for like 15 years. We're finally going to tackle it, and I'm pretty excited that we're going to take our first steps on that. One of the other major infrastructure improvements is quiet zones. We've been talking about it for years. It's finally happening. Marquette's under construction as we speak, and what this will mean is that when these improvements are done, the train will no longer be blaring its horn from Marquette all the way to the village. That's a big improvement for the hotel that we're standing in right now, the 2,700 people who live down here, the office users on 2nd Street that go deaf once or twice or 10 times a day. This is a big deal. There's a reason we work so hard on this, but it's getting close. Like we're hoping that over the next couple of years, it'll be finished completely. I think it's supposed to be done by the end of the year, but knowing how construction goes, it might drag longer. We'll see. But they're trying to wrap this up as fast as they can. Related to that are a lot of other flood mitigation improvements and finishing off the street improvements. You're not supposed to be able to interpret this slide from a distance. What it's showing is that there's going to be new intersections built at River Drive and 3rd, new intersections built at River Drive and 4th. This will connect into the conversion stuff, but is also related to flood mitigation. One of the larger projects will be on LeClaire Street and 3rd that'll be a road raise, which will help some of the standing water that we've seen there over the years immensely. These are big, big projects that have large federal grants associated with them, but one more of a heads up that this is coming over the next couple of years. It'll be a great improvement when it's done. It'll be painful while it's built, but it's going to make a big difference in making this actually meet DOT standards and be much more safe. Related to that is the 3rd and 4th Street, of course. We finally got 3rd Street opened up back in November. 4th Street is cruising along with its road reconstruction. If you recall, they had to resurface everything from Telegraph to Harrison. That's why the project is taking so long. The conversion is actually very little of it. We will hope to see that done in the fall. So if all things go well, we should end up by October-ish having both the street resurfacing completed and then flipping the switch to finally have 4th Street done. We've been kind of hopping on one leg since November. All of the engineering around this assumes that we have multiple lanes running in both directions. With 4th, the way that it's still in one way and under construction, it's really reduced the number of lanes that we will otherwise have when we hit the fall. It'll change some of the congestion that you see to the west will loosen immensely once 4th Street is done. And we're also still working with the city. I want to give Alderman Vasquez credit. He and I have been talking a lot about safety improvements. There's still intersections that we think could use more pedestrian safety improvements, and all of that is an ongoing conversation with the city. But it's been a really nice change of pace for retailers. People are getting used to it. The sky didn't fall. We didn't all, suddenly just light on fire when we could turn both directions on 3rd Street. I know this has been a long time coming, and I'm very happy that we're finally going to land the plane and have the complete project done this fall, because it'll operate very differently when both 3rd and 4th are running at full steam. So this ties into another one of the reasons we did the conversion in the first place. Westward development has been something that the mayor has made a priority of his administration. It's been a priority of many aldermen. One of the things that we see is a lot of energy happening already in this direction. We have 2 incredible Mexican grocery stores and restaurants. We have a gentleman who just bought the old Bruce's New and Used Furniture that has an amazing record store and a club concept that he's working on that's really cool. The old Mary's was purchased and is getting reborn. And there's a lot of work right around Marquette Street that's already feeling good. One of our goals is to make the world toward Marquette feel more like part of downtown. That was part of the whole idea of what we were trying to do. And if you drive it today, it does feel like much more part of downtown. This is just a start of what I think we can see moving forward over the years, but there is momentum, and downtown success begets the West success and vice versa. This is not a zero-sum game. When good things happen downtown, it's more likely that investments like this happen and continue to creep forward. The same is true from the opposite direction. But I want to make sure that people understand that we're just as interested in seeing the West succeed as you are. And frankly, the better we do, the more likely this is to happen. Now, down the street, back in the core, we have Main Street Landing. This is a generational investment that the city has made. This is a brand new shot that we just took from a drone here the other day. It's starting to really come together. The piece that's missing that people are still scratching their head about is the playground. The whole thing is really about the play area, like they did in Chicago. That's coming soon. Once that context gets plopped in here, you'll start to see how all these pieces really fit together, and you'll start to see the opportunity come. What we need to do as a community is leverage this. So once this thing is done, we need to activate it, activate it, activate it. We need events, programming, both from the city's perspective and our own. I really want to make sure that people realize how incredibly rare it is to have an opportunity like this that will draw tons of people back to the riverfront and into downtown. So we're really excited about it. We're proud of the city's investment. The private sector has its job to do to help activate and do more events in this space, but you'll see the scale of that concrete circle there. That's got power. We can do events there. We can do concerts there. I think you're going to see this get integrated into the fabric of the festival season here pretty soon. So moving on, just checking my time here. We're doing good. None of this matters if we don't have a safe and welcoming downtown. None of it. Nothing matters if you don't have a safe and welcoming downtown. That's public safety, that's cleanliness, that's compassionate support for people that may be living on the street. It's a welcoming space and strong partnerships that are going to build that together. I'm very, very proud to call Kelly, my partner in this effort, from the Community Foundation. Earlier this year, or just a couple months ago, we banded together and we brought a nationally renowned group called Clutch Consulting to our community. It's someone who I first met at the International Downtown Association, who blew everyone away and received a standing ovation from every person who has my job in the country. They have a real model that helps get help to the people who need it with a housing first mentality and still takes into account mental health issues and other pieces of this. When we went through this 2-day session, we had every single social service provider you could imagine in the room. We had local governments from all 5 cities, both counties, which has never happened in any time that I can recall, to talk about how we are going to start tackling this more like a region and less like individual cities. We're going to be using a more targeted strategy. We're going to see target long stayers for urgent deep interventions, complex case teams, managing public spaces more effectively, interventions that are quickly springboarding people back into housing. A lot of our social service partners are around the room right now. I saw them when I walked in, and they're all over this room. This takes a village to do, but it's scary to take it on. Some of the feedback you see from Clutch and other communities is, people at first don't know what to believe, and they think, well, man, we've tried this before, or what's really different about this? But the outcomes that Clutch has shown are real. And you can look at all the different communities they've worked in that have done better and more effective work. At the end of the day, we're going to have a whole lot more time to talk about this, but what we're trying to do is flip this funnel upside down. What we really want to make sure is that we're preventing homelessness in the first place, and then once we get people faster help into housing and off the street, that we close down the annual inflow and then it's smaller because the services are more effective. This is a very simplified, and there was a 2-day meeting about this that I can't cover in 5 minutes. But Kelly and the folks at Community Foundation stood up in that meeting and said that they were willing to quarterback this going forward from the private sector side as we continue to organize with the 5 cities in both counties, and Mayor Gordon has made no bones about the fact that this is a priority of his administration. Tomorrow, we are going to be meeting with media. So we've got half a dozen meetings, maybe more, where we're going to pull out the full report of what we learned, of how we're going to start acting differently, how we're going to pool our resources. One of the examples of that is flex funding. It's something that you're going to hear about. Flex funding is the type of money that helps somebody not wind up homeless in the first place because their car broke down and they needed $150 to fix their tire. There are dollars out there that when you implement and engage early enough, you can prevent somebody from landing on the street in the first place, let alone having to fund, it just gets more expensive the further down the line you go. The social service providers that are in the room today that are doing the work on the street of helping people, it is grueling and difficult work, but we can do it better. And these people need more resources, not less. We need more collaboration. I have never been more optimistic that we're actually going to tackle this regionally. All 5 mayors have been very positive about it. Our city administrators have been positive about it. You'll hear a lot more about this tomorrow after the media gets a hold of it. But I want to be clear that this is a priority of our organization, and DDP was proud to fund bringing Clutch to this community with Community Foundation. And one more thank you for Community Foundation in this, but more on this when we have more time. And speaking of time, I'm going to get through our government advocacy quickly. So obviously, Clutch is an example of advocacy, but we also had to deal with the state changing our property taxes this year. We had a lot of private sector people in this room that worked with multi-residential tax classification. We actually improved our TIF development, which I think Davenport is going to have to use the new TIF rules to build more housing. So back to the other issue with not having enough housing, not having too many people on the street, you have to build housing to accomplish that. And I know Leslie's in the room. There are on-street issues that have certain solutions, but part of the solution is to literally build. And TIF is a very important tool to be able to do that, particularly in and around downtown. So I'll spare you the hour-long version of TIF, but they actually improved it, believe it or not, by the end of the state session, and I think we're going to be working with the city to see how we leverage that. So on to some more good news. We had a whole lot of ribbon cuttings this year. Chocolate Manor reopened with its new ownership. This is a lot of Haley's work in our team, doing the marketing with our comms team, with the chamber crew. We're constantly on social media every day. In fact, we are at 9,991 Instagram followers, and if like eight more of you could get on board, it would be great to get to 10,000. I know that would mean a lot to Haley, but this is a lot of work, and our reach is huge. I mean, look at these numbers. This is what we put out every single day to this audience, and a great picture of Becca there, the lemonade sipping shops, the spooky spectacular. We've been trying to do what in our world we call place activation, where we're working with the retailers and really trying to make sure that there's more butts and seats, that people have a reason to come downtown and check out Abernathy's for the first time. It's really powerful stuff and work we're very proud of. Same with Deck the Downtowns. We do the cookie crawl, holiday parade, Alicia's famous holiday pickle that is somehow got a life of its own now. It is incredible how popular that program is. Our staff runs all of that stuff and works with our retailers to pull that together. The holiday challenge was super fun. It was great to see all of the different holiday, just windows come to life. There's the pickle hunt again, and people that use our program to discover places that maybe they just had never found the time to go see or were a little nervous about walking in the door. It's a great way to get new people in there. Ice Extravaganza was a huge success. We didn't get frozen out or snowed out. It was perfect. We had a perfect Ice Extravaganza, and it was great to activate the Freight House that year. And kudos to our ice carvers too, by the way. They've been doing work that they barely get. We pay these guys, but a fraction of what they deserve. The ice carvers have been, I'm very grateful for the work that they've done over the years. Red, White Boom, of course, is right around the corner, so we'll see the skies lit up between Rock Island and Davenport again here shortly. And Bix Weekend, we added our Second Street event this year in addition to Bix Mix on 3rd Street. I still think there's a lot more we can do here. I know some people still miss Street Fest. I hear it all the time. But downtown evolved, and I think this is a healthier way to celebrate on that weekend. We could do a whole spiel just on Bix, but we have never had a better partnership with the folks who run the race. Contrary to popular belief, we don't run or operate the race. The race is run by Michelle and a lot of other hardworking people, but our partnership with them has been great over the last couple of years, and excited to lean into that. Alternating Currents was boiling hot, but it was incredible. Despite the heat, we still had record crowds. We still had just activated every corner of this downtown. It is still the best weekend to attend Downtown Davenport out of the year. It never feels more alive. It never feels more engaged. I'm so proud of what we have done. Jason Gilliland's in the room, who helped found this event with me. Alicia, of course, is here as the new torch bearer of this festival. This takes a village. There are over 200 events that we're coordinating. There are 48 venues, or we have 50 now? 50 events this year. We're in Rock Island and Bettendorf and downtown Davenport. The SMID district, the people in this room, paid for this. The district is the reason this came together, because it is the absolute epitome of what a placemaking event looks like. It brings your community alive. It highlights all the best parts of it. We have partners upon partners upon partners. I mean, literally, like, it's dozens and dozens and dozens of partners to pull this off. We built a downtown over the last 20 years capable of hosting this event. You've heard me talk about that before. We did a documentary that was an hour long that I hope you saw last year that really highlights how downtown's development is directly tied to alternating currents and vice versa. I really want to make sure that we took a moment to just appreciate the scope of this. We would love to take it Quad Cities wide one of these days. We don't have the resources and manpower to do that. I want to make sure everyone hears that. We don't have an axe to grind with Moline or East Moline. This thing's as big as we can get it right now and still manage it. But it is something that I'm deeply proud of, and next year will be our 10-year anniversary, and thanks to the whole team who grinds all the time to put this together, because it's replaced Bix for some businesses in their best financial day of the year. So with that said, the next week after AC is going to be really amazing too. The Cultural Trust has really stepped up, and they're going to be providing our community some just absolute top-notch talent coming into town the following week. Railroad Earth and Yonder is actually going to be over at the Botanical Center. There's a variety of incredible events, including the Pops. Rufus Wainwright is an amazing songwriter, is going to be at the new Redstone Room. The Cultural Trust has really stepped up their game to bring the community something that it's never seen before. And we're really excited about that, and that just means downtown is going to be slamming for like 2 straight weeks, which is exciting to see. So yes, thank you. So there's a variety of other good news. There's just so much that goes on and so much that happens in a given year. One of my favorite moments was when Sierra Farrell, Jason will remember this very well. We had like a fire alarm go off in the Capitol Theater toward the end of her show. That ended up being a false alarm, but of course you got to haul everybody out of there. She ended up playing on 3rd Street in the middle of the sidewalk for the entire audience, and it was incredible. And that could only happen downtown. That is like the epitome of an awesome, super cool thing that could literally never happen anywhere but downtown. And it was so cool to see that happen. Similar to see when Phoebe Bridges recently, just popped up at the Raccoon Motel, and how cool that was. And then just recently, Juneteenth, packed 2nd Street, and it was so nice to see that thing just grow from where it started to where it is today. So I'm going to start wrapping up here with what's next. And what's coming around the corner is a new brand, because I think so much has happened in this downtown, and so much has happened in Davenport, that we really are turning a new page. The mayor mentioned at his own speech, really turning the page and leaning into a new version of Davenport. Downtown Davenport's never had a brand before, and that's kind of hard to believe when you look back at how long this community has been around. But we thought and worked really hard on this. We worked with dozens of other stakeholders around the community for probably 2-3 years on this to start to define what is the vocabulary that we're going to start using to talk about ourselves. How are we going to show community pride, and what are the words that one uses to describe that, and how do you do it in a way that's authentic and real? Because a brand is your identity. Marketing is something different. A brand is who you are and how someone would introduce you to somebody else. So where we landed with this is that downtown has always been a history of new ideas. From the 1800s to the present, downtown has always got one foot in the past and one foot in the future, but it's always innovating, always evolving. So our rally cry around that is that downtown is where small charm meets big city energy with a history of new ideas, a place where our rich past inspires the present, and residents, businesses, and visitors connect to help write the future. We've done that in a lot of different ways throughout history, but you still have to have a logo that goes with this and a look and a feel, and I hope you started to notice the color pattern you've seen throughout this. So the longer we've sat with this, the more we like it. Our primary logo you'll see there on the left that our board approved earlier this year, you're going to start to see that. This is our gift to the community. We don't own this. This is out there. We expect people to use this logo. We expect people to use these colors to help celebrate Davenport and downtown when they want to talk about it. You'll see we have a secondary logo with the clock tower, which I think it's hard to argue that that's not an iconic element of this. I know Dan has got it in his logo too. There's a reason for that. If you think of Davenport skyline, it's that clock tower, and it will always stick in your mind. I'm so proud of the work that we've done on this, and you're going to start to see some little subtle references at our secondary logo. In military time, the clock is set to 1836, which is the founding of Davenport, for those who don't know, which is just kind of a clever Easter egg. And one of the coolest things that you have to do with a brand is figure out how to give it legs in long-term life. Quilted tiles are something that the team at Nelson Creative came up with that we just are thrilled with. They were the ones who helped lead this with us, and what it allows us to do is individualize the story a little bit more of who we are as a community. So whether it's a historical piece, we can reflect on this. There's geographical icons that can reference the river. There's regional icons like corn that will speak more to the Iowa side of the conversation, but they're all symbols that have something to do with who we are as a people and a community. Because the fabric of who we are is what these tiles represent, individually and collectively. So as you start to see how this pieces together, what you're going to start to see is imagery that represents little bits and pieces of both Davenport's downtown, individual businesses, and that a quilt gets formed at the end of the day. This will enable us to be very flexible over time with how we change. Because as we talked about earlier, this place is ever changing. So when you piece the whole piece, or the quilt together, you end up with something that could be really fun. So this is an example of like what a banner might look like on 2nd Street, or if we line banners all the way up and down the street, something that recognizes more of our macro brand, and you'll see that here, where we're telling our never-ending story. But it does eventually play into marketing. So what we'll do is we'll take this brand and we'll start using it in actual ad campaigns, and you're going to start seeing that show up throughout the year and into the coming year. It's very, very flexible, but I think one of my favorite things is that it's not just, it's not static. I mean, this really is a love letter to the community. It was designed to be a love letter to the community. It's inspired by the past, but it's got its eye on the future, which really is and will always be downtown's identity. We really need to believe in who we are. Dan and I used to talk about this all the time when we were running analog. Sometimes there's just a deficit of pride in this community. We need to learn a different language. We need to learn a different set of vocabulary. We need to start talking about what we can do, not what we can't do. We need to be leaning into that. I'm very proud to be from this community because of everything that it's said and done over the years. You're a part of the fabric that tells that story. Everyone in this room has an individual story. And when we start to piece that together, we can even put it in context of businesses. So none of the businesses have even seen this so far. But if you're clever enough, you might be able to pick out a few of them. These are some of our longest standing businesses that are 50 plus years old in downtown. We're going to be able to gift from DDP to each business their own icon that they'll be able to use in our marketing and in their own marketing. The team at Nelson did a really good job helping us build this concept out so that while we have these macro level ideas, we also have it at a very small and customizable scale. So there'll be a brand toolkit. The website, it gets relaunched today. If you go to our website, by tomorrow you'll see it with all the new colors and schemes. And everyone has access to this so that you can individualize it for yourself. A history of new ideas brings me to my closure, and I promise I'm wrapping up just a hair over time here. We have always been a history of new ideas. This room and these people in this district have driven innovation from the dawn of this community. Next year, our tax district turns 50 years old, which is an incredible accomplishment for this community. There's a gentleman who had my job originally there in 1977, James Conway. It's a great story, and I'm saving the deep dive on that for next year's presentation. But I want to be really clear that, you know, this history of new ideas and this district renewal is on the horizon. Our tax district is up for renewal in a few years, you know, closer to 2030. So we're going to start talking about a lot more about how we got here and how important it is that it continue. These are some of the cast of characters over the since the 1960s that have had a piece of this from my vantage point at the DDP level. We will always be innovators. I'm so proud of the private sector or the public sector that they shook hands 50 years ago and said, neither one of us are going to be able to do this alone. And it's true today, maybe more so true today than it was in the 70s, that the government's not going to save us, the private sector's not going to save us alone either. Together is the only way this is going to happen. And there's a lot of people in this community who love to focus on everything we've ever done wrong. And there's a lot of that goes on in the Quad Cities. But there's a hell of a lot of things we got right, and this is one of them. Everyone in this room should feel great pride. Everyone in this room should feel great responsibility and great depth of care that we continue this relationship and make sure that as we enter the next 50 years of this relationship, that we understand that this community lives and dies together. It will wither and die alone. And our relationship with City Hall is such an amazing example of how both parties have a role to play, and one that I think we're going to play a lot longer. So as we carve out the next chapter of this, and this is the final slide, we have to start connecting the dots. Like, there's a method to this madness, that you cannot just haphazardly run around and hope that your community develops. Between the arts and culture community, reckoning with 324 Main Street, how do we turn that page, and how do we work with the community to make sure that that legacy is honored and that, you know, the appropriate decisions are made with what happens on that corner. The public infrastructure happening right now is crazy. The park, the streets. We have commercial development in the core that needs a shot in the arm. We have this generational opportunity on the riverfront. We talked about the ground transportation center. We talked about the East End with the Times building. This stuff doesn't happen on accident. You make it happen. You have to make it happen. And if you don't, someone else will make it happen for you, and largely that doesn't pan out the way you want to. We have got to start realizing that all of these cylinders have to fire at the same time. The West Side needs to develop. The Centennial Bridge is important to what happens here. So just please know that, like, when we go to work every day, when we get out of bed and we open that door to our office, this is what's on our mind, of trying to make sure that we're taking your money and taking it as far as we can and working with the city to make sure that the best possible outcome happens when we start to piece together the quilt of this entire community and the fabric that makes it who we are today. So with that, I want to say thank you for your time, for your investment, for caring. I've never worked for an organization, I've never worked for another organization that could care more than the one that works for you. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you next year.